I wanted to discuss something that I thought was really important because I think as we go through life, life can be confusing, right? We always talk about, all these things that can happen in life. There's so many different, just different avenues that we can approach. And I thought it was funny because as we start to look at life, life can really become redundant sometimes. And that's the, kind of getting stuck in the same patterns and all of those great things. I don't say they're not great things. But you can get stuck in these ruts, right? These ruts and where you're at. And I thought it was really important for us to be able to look at this piece of life. And this piece of life is the narrative or your story. I think so many times we get caught up in the narrative of other people. With today's world and where it's at, there's so much information out there that you can gain from, the internet. You can download a book, in seconds. You can download, all these different things from the internet, social media. You see all of these things, and that really is, kind of an easy way for other people to take control of your story and your narrative. And I thought it was really important for us to kind of discuss that because a lot of the times with the people that I coach and the people, that I see on a day-to-day basis, a lot of us get stuck in believing the narrative of other people. Other people are writing the narrative for us. So you are no longer in control of your story. That narrative belongs to somebody else because they're writing it for you, because you allow that to happen. And I think it's really important for us to understand that we are in full control of our narrative, of our story. That's why it's your story, not my story, not anybody else's story. And it's very, very important that you understand that you are in full control of your story and how that is going to work for you. Because as we look at today's world and how much it's changing every day. It's always going. It's going, and things are just, it's crazy. It's bonkers on how much stuff has changed, in my short 31 years on this world, right? In this world. So I think it's important for you to really understand that your story is your story. And it was interesting I had a conversation with somebody I used to work with in one of the districts when I was in this company. And it was funny because we were talking about our experience and how it goes. And we kind of had the same experience or the same ideas. And I thought it was really important. I used to call this district the groupthink district because I don't know if any of you guys know groupthink. It's a psychological phenomenon. It's interesting in how it works. So realistically, it can be personal or business, and I'll give you the definitions. The practice of thinking or making decisions as a group in a way that discourages creativity or individual responsibility. And I think it's interesting to really see how this works because in this district, it's a sales organization. We all kind of just felt like we were just capped, like we're at this roof and we're no longer, we're never going to go above this line, right? Because of the cap, there's so many people had these thoughts of, they're just kind of, this idea of conformity, right? They wanted you to conform to their ideas and that was it. Anybody that was creative or trying to be creative or think of outside the box, you were kind of shut down. You're kind of like, this is way different. And yeah, why change what we're doing? Right? So you were met with resistance. And I see that in this world, in this life, whether it's your friends, your family, your coworkers, all these things can happen to you. And that's where it's, we see a lot of people, people I coach on a day-to-day basis as we go through this thing, of life. I see, people get discouraged all the time because people around them they feel like people want to hold them down and hold them back. And I think it's really, really interesting to hear that, right? And it's scary to think that because a lot of the times, a lot of people, the narrative is really, either controlled by you or controlled by somebody else, right? So, I see it as, when we were first born, obviously your narrative is going to be kind of shaped by your family, your immediate family, your parents, your siblings. These people are going to kind of control your narrative, for your developmental years, right? That's what they're going to do. They learn their things that they learned growing up from, their parents, and they're kind of passing that on to you, or, maybe they went the complete opposite way and, went against the grain of their parents and, kind of created their own narrative themselves and kind of passed that along to you. And I think that's where most people get stuck, right? When people talk about being stuck or in a rut, you've got to be able to look at the narrative of what you have within yourself, right? What is your story? What is your narrative? A lot of the times when, you see people, and even in my example, sometimes, when I was, even to this day, I kind of look back at my past, right? And say, hey, maybe I didn't have the greatest relationship with my parents, right? Or, I had a great relationship with my parents, but it's very up and down, right? But a lot of the times your thinking and your behaviors of what you're doing on a day-to-day basis can be controlled by past narrative, right? Your past chapters, those chapters were already written, and a lot of the times we go back to those chapters, and that's where we get stuck. We get trapped in the idea that we maybe didn't have such a great relationship, and we're trying to analyze of how it could have been better, but instead of living in the present and really just working on those relationships from here on out, right? So many people get stuck in the past because they're searching for answers. And it's really great to be searching for answers, but at the same time, you're not going to find a lot of great answers from the past. I mean, you're going to be able to recognize some things and really go through it. But at the end of the day, we've got to be able to live in the present and know that we can write our story today. And it's very, very imperative that we look at our friends, we look at our family and say, you know, hey, who are the people that I surround myself with, right? Kind of take an assessment and kind of look at that idea. You know, one of the biggest things of groupthink is, you know, a lot of people will conform to that idea, you know, of somebody because, you know, they want to have a sense of belonging. You know, you fear being alone. And that's where you can get stuck, or you get stuck in this idea or this mindset of this group of where you've been, right? Instead of being creative, instead of being unique, that's, you know, ultimately, I think that's what we strive for in being alive, is to be unique and live your life and live your story, right? Is to write your own story. But we get so caught up in other people's story, or, you know, sometimes we're told a story by family and friends and we believe it, and then we have to kind of dig and research, and then, hey, maybe we find out that that's not true, right? So you've got to be able to control your narrative, control what's around you, because at the end of the day, if you're not controlling your narrative, you're not controlling your story, guess what? Somebody else is writing it for you. And that can in itself be very scary. You've got to be able to look within yourself and say, hey, what do I want? What are my values? What do I want out of life? And how am I going to achieve that? A lot of the times in the narrative or previous narrative, or, you know, if you're like me, a lot of the times you would beat yourself up all over and over and over again and say, you know what? I can't do this because, you know, nobody in my you know, circle has been able to do this, right? At the end of the day, you can learn to do anything and push forward with anything. And you've got to be able to push outside of that comfort zone, right? It's kind of, you know, that sense of belonging and fear of being alone, you know, it is scary. And a lot of the times when you're stuck in your comfort zone, you're going to just stay there and you're going to be miserable because you're not moving forward, you're not progressing. And ultimately, as humans, that's what our goal is to be here, is to progress and get better. And if you're not doing that, that's where you really start to get really uncomfortable. And you've got to be able to say, hey, you know what? I can move outside of this comfort zone. I can move outside of this group. And no matter what anybody in this group tells me, right? You know, hey, this has worked in the past. You know, you've got to be able to challenge the other thoughts of people within your group. You know, and sometimes it takes one person, you know, one person that's going to disrupt that thought pattern, right? And you become the leader and you set that example and make a difference in your life. And then other people will start to move up and gradually get better too. So somebody's got to be a disruptor. Somebody's got to be in there and be a leader and say, hey, I got this, you know. Yeah, I've never seen this done, but I see other people in the world that have been able to do it. Let me mirror and look at and research what they do and say, hey, I can do this, right? If somebody's done it, you can do it. And I think we get so caught up in saying, you know, if I haven't seen somebody close to me do it, how can I do it? And you start to discourage yourself from being unique and being creative. You've got to be able to be a solution provider instead of a problem, you know, looking for problems, right? A lot of people are easily looking for problems because they want to be able to just say, oh, well, hey, I tried, but, you know, I just couldn't do it because of all these problems. You know, A, B, C, you know, everybody can list all these excuses and all these problems. But at the end of the day, your narrative is going to be created by you. Do not allow other people to get in your mind, even yourself. When you start to hear yourself talking about all the negative things, there's times where I will literally sit down and go to create a podcast episode and I say, hey, you know, this is crazy. It doesn't make any sense. And, you know, I have to say, hey, you know what? Let me speak on it. Let me talk about it. Let me put it together on the whiteboard and see if it makes sense. And if it doesn't make sense or it doesn't reach everybody, okay, it's great. It doesn't matter. As long as it reached somebody and made a difference, that's what matters. It's the same thing with your narrative and your story. You're in full control. You've got to be able to say, hey, I got this, right? If you want to go out there and start a business, go out there and do it. Start taking the steps to move forward in that, right? Start moving. And, you know, no matter what, because that was one of the things I always said is, you know, I don't have the knowledge, right? I've had some college experience. I don't have a college degree. I didn't go anywhere for anybody to teach me how to run a business. What's the first steps, right? Take that knowledge that's available to you go use those resources, right? Using your resources, social media, there's tons of people out there that have started businesses. Find some mentors that can teach you how to do those things and erase that narrative of you can't do something because you've always been told that you couldn't do something, right? Or, the media will tell you, oh, you can't do this. The world's a big scary place. It's negative. It's full of, just evil, right? You hear that all the time on a lot of the news stations, right? And that can create a frustration and a scared feeling within yourself. But just know that, the world isn't just, the world is created by you. Your story and your narrative is created by you. And what you believe is what you will achieve. So you've got to be able to go out there and be the best you can be. Understand that your narrative is your narrative, your story. You write it. No one else can write that for you unless you give them the control to do that. So let me leave you with this quote: control your narrative or someone else will, right? Plain and simple. So go out there, create your own narrative, create your own story. Your story is going to be defined by you and no one else. Because if you give that power away, you can't complain later that you didn't do anything because of somebody else. It's all up to you and your decision. So go out there, be the best you can be, and I know that you guys can go out there and do that. I know that you can be positive in whatever you want to. If you want to start that business, start working on that. If you want to go back to school, or if you want to start school, go do it. Just do it, right? If that's going to make you happy, that's going to make your life better, go do it.